The manager tore up her request, celebrating his arrogant victory over the seemingly low-class patron. The entire lobby, phones raised, watched the public humiliation. Carver was convinced he had crushed an insignificant pest, reinforcing his belief that only the elite belonged. But just as Selena walked to the exit, two black, armored SUVs screeched to a halt. A powerful executive ignored the smug manager and walked straight past him, toward the woman he had just ordered to vanish. The truth was about to explode. The person Carver dismissed as traffic was the new CEO and owner. The reckoning had arrived. The story is just getting interesting. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The massive crystal chandelier of the Imperial Hotel lobby cast dazzling light across the cool, pristine marble floor, a calculated stage for wealth and status. The atmosphere of hushed, expensive calm was perfect for the test. Selena Rowan approached the check-in desk, her attire designed to be a contradiction. She wore a tailored, midnight blue dress that was undeniably expensive in its cut and fabric, but entirely free of the flashy logos and statement jewelry that usually marked the hotel's elite. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, polished bun. She was deliberately adopting the persona of a low-key, potentially undesirable patron, a simple disguise for the network CEO. She was ready for the test of appearance. Behind the gleaming, polished counter stood Charles Carver, the general manager, immaculate in his dark blue suit. He assessed Selena in one swift, dismissive glance. His face, usually trained for a smooth, superficial smile, tightened with immediate, condescending arrogance. He saw the lack of obvious labels, the quiet demeanor, and immediately classified her as a waste of his time. Selena placed a small, folded document on the counter, a simple inquiry about securing a short-term, specialized accommodation package. Carver didn't even pick it up. His eyes stayed glued to her attire and his own reflection in the counter's surface. "I can tell you immediately," Carver began, his voice a low, chilling monotone that dismissed her entire presence. "We do not accommodate requests of that nature. Our services are reserved for established, long-term clients or confirmed suite reservations. I highly doubt, given the nature of your inquiry, that you meet the necessary financial prerequisites." He didn't need to shout yet. The subtle, ingrained prejudice was already thick in the air. He made no effort to check a system, call a colleague, or even offer a polite refusal. He simply rejected her based on the appearance of being a struggling patron. The cold arrogance in his eyes confirmed to Selena that the hotel's culture was rotten from the top down. Carver was failing the test on the first question. What will happen when his condescending arrogance is met with the silent, formidable power of the woman he has just dismissed? The manager's controlled arrogance burst into raw, unchecked fury. "We don't need your kind of traffic in here," Charles Carver hissed, abandoning all pretense of professional courtesy. He leaned further across the counter, his expensive cologne suddenly overpowered by the smell of his own rage. "You clearly have no business approaching a counter reserved for our distinguished clientele. Do you think this is a shelter? An outreach center? Get that look off your face. You were already told to leave." He slammed the counter, the hollow sound echoing like a drum in the high-ceilinged lobby. He continued his loud, degrading tirade, declaring to everyone within earshot that Selena Rowan had no business even standing in a hotel of their caliber. He sneered, making sweeping gestures that encompassed her simple attire. "People like you are a liability. You don't match the standard. Go back to whatever hovel you crawled out of." The cruelty was shocking, but the reaction of the witnesses was even more disturbing. The two young guests in the lounge, who had been waiting for their luggage, raised their phones higher, ensuring they captured the manager's rage and Selena's stoic humiliation in full cinematic quality. They were laughing under their breath, not at a joke, but at the sheer, brutal spectacle. The humiliation peaked when a young bellhop, Michael Rivers, walked into the epicenter of the confrontation. He was pushing a cart laden with heavy, branded suitcases, his face damp with effort. Michael immediately caught sight of Carver's blazing face and heard the ugly, classist insults. The young man's steps faltered. A flicker of genuine discomfort and distress crossed his features, a visible struggle between his conscience and his job security. He was the only employee to show a flicker of empathy. Yet, that flicker wasn't enough to act. He quickly averted his eyes, biting his lip, and forced himself to hurry past the scene, his head down, leaving Selena isolated in the center of the manager's malicious performance. He knew that to intervene was to commit professional suicide. Selena stood alone, absorbing the full force of Carver's unchecked cruelty. The manager had achieved his goal, maximum public humiliation, reinforcing his belief that the hotel's power lay not in service, but in crushing those he deemed insignificant. Selena Rowan did not respond to the vulgar escalation. She stood firm, her poise an impenetrable shield against Charles Carver's flailing rage. The manager's voice had cracked on the last insult, but Selena offered no defense, no counter-argument, and no plea. She was maintaining her composure as her eyes remained locked on Carver's, a gaze that absorbed the cruelty not as humiliation, but as damning, conclusive evidence. She wasn't fighting back. She was documenting the full extent of his unchecked hatred. The silence from the desk was deafening after Carver ran out of breath. He stood there, red-faced and panting, waiting for the subordinate's tears, for the stammered excuse, for something he could crush further. But all he received was the cool, intelligent scrutiny of her steady, unblinking gaze. He tried to laugh again, a short, brittle sound, but it died in his throat under the weight of her stillness. He felt, illogically, that he was the one being judged. She finally broke the contact, looking down briefly at the small, pathetic shreds of paper scattered on the counter before surveying the rest of the lobby. She saw the voyeurs with their phones, the cowardly staff pretending to polish invisible spots on the marble, and the empty space where the sympathetic bellhop, Michael, had hurried away. She saw the institutional decay of the hotel's values in that single sweep. Then, she spoke, her voice low and clear, cutting through the heavy silence left by Carver's shouting. It was firm, yet devoid of emotion, a dismissal, not a concession. "Understood," she said, her voice carrying a subtle authority that went completely unnoticed by the manager. "If this is how you manage your guest services, then I will certainly leave your property." She pivoted with slow, almost ceremonial grace and began walking toward the large, polished revolving doors. She did not rush. She did not look back. Every step was a calculated move in her plan. She needed Charles Carver to believe he had won. She needed him to feel the complete satisfaction of the victory he had just brutally manufactured. The arrogance of that triumph would be his final, fatal mistake. She disappeared through the revolving door, leaving the general manager swelling with petty, poisonous pride. The hotel was quiet now, but the silence would not last long. The quiet triumph of Charles Carver lasted less than 2 minutes. He was still standing behind the counter, smoothing his suit and savoring his victory over Selena Rowan, when the entire mood of the hotel, and the street outside, shifted violently. The silence was abruptly shattered by the deep, powerful roar of high-end engines slowing to a halt. The noise was instantly recognizable as vehicles meant for protection and rapid movement, not luxury cruising. 2 identical, solid black Cadillac Escalade *, vehicles synonymous with either high-ranking government officials or major corporate players, glided to a quiet, synchronized stop directly outside the Imperial Hotel's glass entrance. The sight instantly commanded attention. It was too precise, too coordinated, to be a casual VIP drop-off. Before the revolving door could even fully stop spinning from Selena's exit, the back doors of the SUVs opened and 3 tall, dark-suited men emerged. They moved as one, with the terrifying, practiced efficiency of a trained unit. The men wore subtle earpieces and scanned the lobby, their movements swift and precise, a well-oiled machine in motion. They were not hotel security. They were an imposing, external force. Their arrival immediately crushed the residual chatter in the lobby. The 2 young guests who had been filming the humiliation snapped their phones down, suddenly looking small and frightened, understanding instinctively that their casual voyeurism was not permitted in the presence of this level of genuine power. Charles Carver, who had been composing his triumphant memo, straightened his spine, confused but excited. He didn't recognize the specific detail, but he recognized the sheer financial weight of the setup. He quickly adjusted his tie and smoothed his hair, whispering excitedly to the nearest concierge, "Get ready. This is it. Someone major is arriving. You see? This is the caliber we truly cater to." He was blinded by the belief that this important arrival was a confirmation of his status, a reward for having successfully ejected the pauper. The door was opening for true power, and Carver believed, with every fiber of his being, that it was opening for him. The security detail took up positions near the doors, securing the entry, making it clear that the most important figure was yet to enter and the wait was about to end. Charles Carver was vibrating with professional excitement, his past fury entirely forgotten, replaced by the dizzying rush of impending status. He adjusted the knot of his tie, his gaze fixed on the entrance. He firmly believed the universe was rewarding him for his recent act of professional savagery. The revolving door spun, and the atmosphere compressed. Darius Sterling striding into the lobby was a tall, sharp-dressed executive, his suit impeccable, his presence demanding respect without needing to raise his voice. This was Darius Sterling, a globally recognized titan of corporate finance and Selena Rowan's trusted business partner. Beside him was his personal entourage, moving with the same synchronized efficiency as the security detail that had preceded them. The arrival confirmed that this was not a simple VIP. This was a power move. The sheer, concentrated financial power radiating from Sterling and his team sucked the air out of the room. The entire lobby, already silenced by the security detail, now stood in a state of absolute, reverent stillness. Carver saw his opportunity. He smoothed his dark blue jacket one last time and surged forward from behind the counter, a practiced, oily smile pasted across his face. He extended his right hand, ready to deliver his rehearsed greeting, eager to secure a moment of acknowledgement from a figure of this caliber. He imagined the stories he'd tell. "Mr. Sterling, welcome to the Imperial. We are honored to have you," Carver began, projecting his voice with just the right mix of deference and confidence. "I'm Charles Carver, General Manager. How may I assist you this afternoon? We can have you taken to your private lounge immediately." It was a perfect, seamless attempt to assert control and associate himself with the power that had just walked through the door. But Darius Sterling did not even spare Carver a flicker of eye contact. He continued his measured, powerful stride, his gaze fixed on a point straight ahead. He walked right past Carver, utterly ignoring the manager's outstretched hand and his pathetic, rehearsed welcome. To Sterling, Charles Carver was not a person. He was an inconvenient fixture, a temporary obstacle that did not require a moment of acknowledgement. Carver's hand remained suspended midair. His smile froze, then dissolved into a look of utterly paralyzed confusion. He had been completely, clinically dismissed. He turned his head, watching Sterling's back, and realized Sterling's focus was not on the main check-in area, nor the hotel's luxurious amenities. Sterling was walking, with clear purpose, toward the far end of the lobby, near the revolving doors, where Selena Rowan had just made her dignified exit. Carver's breath hitched in his throat. His triumph over the pauper had just been exposed as the setup for his own professional execution. The manager's hand remained awkwardly suspended in the air. Charles Carver was still reeling from the profound professional insult of being utterly ignored by Darius Sterling. He watched, paralyzed, as Sterling continued his purposeful stride toward the revolving doors where the pauper he had just humiliated was waiting. Darius Sterling moved with the focused, unswerving certainty of a predator. He walked straight past the trembling general manager as if he were an annoying piece of forgotten furniture. Sterling's movement was a clinical, devastating act of rejection. He stopped directly in front of Selena Rowan. The silence in the lobby was now painful, stretched to the point of snapping. Every single eye, from the security detail to the mortified filming guests, was fixed on this interaction. Darius didn't offer a corporate handshake. Instead, he inclined his head slightly, a subtle but deeply profound gesture of respect that told the entire room he was addressing his superior. He spoke, and his voice, loud and clear, cut through the oppressive stillness like a gong. "Madam Rowan, my deepest apologies for the delay. We had some turbulence getting the final board approvals pushed through this morning." The words hit Charles Carver with the physical force of a wrecking ball. "Madam Rowan, board approvals. Carver's entire body went rigid. His mind, cycling frantically, desperately tried to find any reasonable explanation. A joke, a high-level escort. Anything but the truth. But the sheer gravitas of Darius Sterling, a man who moved billions, allowed for no interpretation other than the literal. Carver's face drained entirely of color, turning a horrifying shade of gray-white. He slumped against the counter, his expensive suit suddenly seeming ridiculous and cheap. He finally understood. His act of petty tyranny had been committed against the new owner of the entire network. Darius Sterling stepped back slightly from Selena, giving her room to face the crowd. He then turned to address the still frozen, silent lobby, his voice ringing with indisputable authority. Everyone, this is Selena Rowan, the Chief Executive Officer, and effective this morning, the new majority owner of this entire hotel network. The climax was complete. The truth had exploded into the lobby, reversing every expectation, every power dynamic, and every humiliation of the last 10 minutes. The hotel fell into a deeper, heavier silence, the silence of utter, catastrophic shock. The pauper was the CEO. The manager who had screamed, "Get out! You don't belong here!" had just signed his own death warrant in the most public, spectacular way possible. The time for quiet evaluation was over. The time for the reckoning had begun. The entire atmosphere in the lobby was now suffocating. The announcement had been made. Selena Rowan was the owner. Charles Carver, his face utterly gray, stood frozen against the counter, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a borrowed costume. He was shattered, watching his entire reality collapse around him. Selena turned slowly to face him. The transition from the humiliated patron to the absolute chief executive was complete and chilling. She did not raise her voice. In fact, she spoke with a quiet, lethal calm that was infinitely more terrifying than Carver's own previous screaming. "And Madam Rowan," Carver stammered, his lips trembling. I had no idea. I sincerely apologize. It was a terrible misunderstanding, I assure you." Selena cut him off, her eyes fixed on his with a sharp, unrelenting scrutiny. "There was no misunderstanding, Mr. Carver. There was only judgment. You didn't judge me on my credentials, my financial capacity, or my character. You judged me on your prejudice about who you thought should be standing at this counter." She took a deliberate step closer, forcing him to cringe backward. She was delivering his fate using his own ammunition. "In the last 10 minutes, she continued, her voice echoing clearly in the stunned silence. "You told me I was wasting your time. You violently tore up a simple inquiry form in front of a dozen witnesses, and you screamed, 'Get out! You don't belong here!'" She paused, letting his most damning, atrocious phrases hang in the air, transforming his victory into his execution. "I asked for your badge before, when I was simply a candidate/guest, and you laughed. Now, I ask for it as your employer." She held out her hand, palm up, with calm, undeniable authority. "Your badge, Mr. Carver." Now, Carver's jaw worked uselessly. He fumbled frantically at his lapel, his fingers trembling so violently he could barely unclip the magnetic card. The sheer terror of his impending unemployment, combined with the humiliation of his public exposure, had broken him entirely. "Sir, please, Madam Rowan, I have a family," he pleaded, his voice cracking into a desperate whisper. Selena's gaze was hard and unwavering. "I understand. I am building an organization to support mine, too. And if my family, or any person I value, were ever subjected to the humiliation you just inflicted on me, I would want to know I took a stand for what was right." She took the badge from his shaking hand, her touch cool and deliberate. "You are terminated, effective immediately. Your public cruelty and lack of fundamental human dignity have no place in a company I own." She placed the badge gently on the counter, leaving him standing there, fired, exposed, and utterly powerless. The reckoning was complete. With Charles Carver standing paralyzed and disgraced, the silence in the lobby remained absolute, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the ventilation. Selena Rowan had completed the professional execution, but the job of reshaping the hotel's toxic culture was just beginning. She turned from the counter, where Carver's badge lay abandoned, and addressed the entire, frozen room. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over the remaining staff, the desk attendants, the concierge, the passing security guards, and lingered pointedly on the section of the lounge where the two young guests had been filming just minutes earlier. They were now red-faced, pretending to examine the architecture. "I was not alone in this lobby just now," Selena stated, her voice quiet but piercing, demanding the attention of every soul present. "My humiliation was public, and it was witnessed by dozens of you. I saw phones raised, capturing the spectacle for entertainment or gossip. I watched employees look away, prioritizing their comfort over the fundamental integrity of this business." She held out her hands in a gesture of deliberate disappointment. "Those of you whose primary function is customer service, who are paid to uphold the values of the Imperial Network, did nothing. You allowed unchecked cruelty to occur, believing it was not your place to intervene. You stood by while an individual was verbally assaulted and publicly shamed." Selena's voice hardened. "In my company, passivity is complicity. To stand silent while injustice is committed is nearly as corrosive as committing the act itself. It shows a lack of moral courage and a failure of empathy, traits that are non-negotiable in an organization built on service and respect." She delivered her sentence to the onlookers with cold clarity. "Therefore, let this be the new mandate. All management and front-of-house staff who stood silently and watched the manager's actions will be placed on immediate comprehensive review and mandatory ethical retraining. Your performance, your tenure, and your suitability for the new Imperial Network will be reevaluated based on your actions today and your demonstrated commitment to human dignity moving forward." The staff members exchanged looks of panic. They hadn't just watched a firing. They had signed up for a career purgatory. Selena concluded the warning with finality. "If you passively consent to this kind of behavior, you do not have the integrity to work for the Imperial Network. This culture of apathy and arrogance ends today." The message was brutally clear. The days of ignoring the unpleasant realities of power imbalances were over. But while her decree was severe, it was not absolute. She still had one final act of justice to deliver, a reward for the singular flicker of conscience she had observed. With the sentence delivered to the passive staff, Selena Rowan performed her final act of justice. She turned away from the petrified figure of Charles Carver, whose public career had ended 5 minutes after his greatest display of arrogance, and focused on the young man in the luggage area. "Michael Rivers," Selena called out, her voice clear and carrying to the furthest corners of the silenced lobby. The bellhop looked up, his face a picture of terror and awe, unsure if he was about to be congratulated or fired for his moment of hesitation. "I address the complicity of those who stood silent," Selena stated. "Now, I will address the integrity of the one person who showed a flicker of courage." She walked toward Michael. "You looked away out of fear, Michael. That is a human failing. But you felt distress. You showed genuine empathy. That is the core quality this new network requires." She stopped directly in front of him. "You did not stand in silent support of that man's cruelty. You simply prioritized your security. I am here to change the system so that decency is never a risk to your security." Selena then delivered the promotion that would change his life. "Michael Rivers, effective immediately, you are promoted. You will bypass all junior ranks and serve as the Assistant Guest Services Manager of the Imperial Hotel. You will report directly to Darius Sterling and be instrumental in implementing our new culture of respect." Michael's jaw dropped. The promotion was an astronomical leap, a reward for an almost invisible moment of conscience. He stood stunned, clutching the handle of his luggage cart, barely able to process the words. Selena placed a firm, supportive hand on his shoulder. "Your first and most important mandate, Michael, is simple. You are the new face of integrity here. You will ensure that every single person who steps onto this property, regardless of their attire, their background, their request, or their perceived status, is treated with profound dignity and professionalism. No exceptions." The final, overwhelming wave of emotion broke over the lobby. The guests, who had witnessed the complete dramatic arc from abject humiliation to absolute justice, could not hold back any longer. The first clap came, quickly followed by another, and then the sound exploded into a thunderous, deafening ovation. They cheered not just for the executive, but for the profound, moral justice that had been served. Selena walked back to the counter, picked up the torn, jagged pieces of paper, and looked out over the applauding crowd. She held the scraps up for a final symbolic moment before dropping them into a nearby disposal bin. Today begins a new era for the Imperial Hotel Network, she announced, her voice strong and clear, carrying effortlessly across the vast room. And I leave a clear warning for everyone. The price of entry here is respect. The value of a person is not measured by the clothes they wear, nor the money they carry, but by the dignity they possess and the respect they are given. In this place, no one, guest or employee, will ever be treated as disposable again. The crowd roared in agreement and relief. The power had changed hands. The humiliation had been answered with absolute authority, and the entire hotel had been forced to stop and reckon with its own values. Justice had been delivered. The entire lobby, silent only moments before, now erupted in a deafening, unified applause. Selena Rowan had turned humiliation into ultimate authority, delivering a powerful lesson on integrity that resonated far beyond the walls of the Imperial Hotel. The manager who humiliated her was gone, and the kind-hearted bellhop was elevated. Justice wasn't just served, it was televised, witnessed, and affirmed by a cheering crowd. This story makes you wonder. If you had been one of the guests filming Charles Carver's abuse, would you have been brave enough to drop your phone and step forward? Share your answer in the comments below. If you love stories where the underestimated rise to power and fight for what's right, then don't miss our next video. Hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story.